So today we will do the pharynx. Now pharynx is an irregular muscular tube. It starts from the base of the skull and it is continuous with the down to the esophagus. As we have done the head and neck region, so if we cut the sagittal section of the head and neck, this picture we will got that anteriorly the face and in the above there is a skull with the brain, the cranial cavity and the brain inside, and this is the base of the skull formed by the basilar part of the occipital bone. This is the foramen magnum, and anterior to foramen magnum this is a pharyngeal tubercle here. This is the cranial cavity formed in the sagittal section of the skull we have done. Then we have done the anterior arc of the atlas, body of the C2, C3, C4, C5, C6 vertebra, C7, that is called the vertebra prominens with the longest spine, and then start the first thoracic vertebra, that is the T1. All the cervical vertebrae, they are forming the cervical lordotic angle, and anterior to them lies the prevertebral muscles, and all these prevertebral muscles, they are covered by the prevertebral fascia. So that is the posterior aspect of the neck. Anteriorly there is a nasal cavity, lateral wall with the concha of nasal cavity. This is the hard palate, and behind the hard palate is hanging the soft palate, that is the uvula, and here is the mandible is cut to show the inferior and the superior genial tubercles. From the superior genial tubercle, the safety muscle of the tongue, that is the genoglossus, goes to the tongue. So here we form in the mouth, the tongue part. The posterior most part of the tongue is having the epiglottis, the glossoepiglottic fold. Below here lies the hide bone with the body, lasso cornu and the crater cornu, and here lies the thyroid cartilage with oblique line on it, on the lamina, and there lies the cricoid cartilage below here. The lower part of the cricoid cartilage is the start of the windpipe, that is the trachea, with the C-shaped cartilaginous rings over them. So this is the trachea is there. At the same level, the food pipe also starts, that is the esophagus, posteriorly with the outer longitudinal and the inner circular smooth muscles, and in between two there is a tracheoesophageal groove, and this tracheoesophageal groove contains inferior laryngeal artery, inferior laryngeal vein, and the recurrent laryngeal nerve in the tracheoesophageal groove. So anteriorly there are three cavities: the nasal cavity, the oral cavity, and the laryngeal cavity. This is the thyroid membrane between the hyoid bone, lower border, and the upper border of the thyroid cartilage. This is the thyroid membrane, and it is pierced by three structures: internal laryngeal nerve, superior laryngeal artery, and superior laryngeal vein. So this is the anterior side of the cavity. Posterior side is the prevertebral muscles, the cervical vertebra and prevertebral fascia. Now this is the gap, starting from the base of the skull and the upper border of the esophagus. Now this gap is closed by a irregular muscular tube formed by 6 muscles that form the what is called the pharynx. Now pharynx can be exemplified with the help of the 6 muscles are there. 3 muscles, they are constrictor muscles, and 3 are the vertical muscles. 3 constrictor muscles, they are the superior constrictor, middle constrictor, and inferior constrictor. 3 vertical muscles, they are the stylopharyngeus muscle, salpingopharyngeus muscle, and palatopharyngeus muscle. So 3 vertical, so they give the outside support to the pharyngeal tube, and these 3 constrictor muscles, they are constrictor because they are muscles, they are almost circular in outline. So they are the constrictor muscles. So these 3 constrictor muscles can be exemplified with the help of the 3 flower pods. If you keep these 3 flower pods one into concentrically in one into the another, and if we break the anterior wall of them, so now this is the superior constrictor, middle constrictor, and inferior constrictor. So they are the 3 flower pods which we have broken in the midline. So actually this line represents the origin of these 3 muscles. So this is how we exemplify the 3 flower pods one into another, and they form a tube. Now we have broken the 3 flower pods from here, so here we see this. And these 3 constrictor muscles, now we fit these 3 flower pods with their open and anteriorly like this. So we have to fit these 3 muscles from the base of the skull to the esophagus like this. So this is how this 3 superior, middle, and inferior constrictor muscle, they constitute the pharynx, that is the, behind the nose is the nasopharynx, behind the oral cavity the oropharynx, and behind the larynx is the laryngopharynx. The lower part of this pharynx is continuous with the inner circular muscles of the esophagus. So this is how the 3 constrictor muscles, they are concentric and they are fitted here to fill the gap between the 3 vertebral muscles and the posterior aspect of the 3 cavities. So this is how we understand what is the 3 constrictor muscles, the superior, middle, and inferior constrictor muscles, like the 3 flower pods which are broken posteriorly and like this, and it is fitted, it is like this. Now we will take one by one the muscle, the origin. Now the superior constrictor muscle. Now the superior constrictor muscle will take origin, number 1, from the median pterygoid plate, lower free border, posterior border, and the pterygoid hamulus. That is the hammer-like structure. So this muscle will take origin, and this muscle is fan shaped. First muscle fibers are from the here, then it takes origin from the pterygomandibular raphe. So this pterygomandibular raphe is a thickening, musculotendinous thickening, superior attached to the pterygoid hamulus of the medial pterygoid plate, and inferiorly it is attached to the mandible, the area behind the last molar tooth. Last molar tooth is the attachment. So this superior constrictor muscle takes origin from the entire length of the pterygomandibular raphe plus the posterior part of the mylohyoid line, posterior, and some fibers from the lateral surface of the tongue also. So this becomes a fan-shaped muscle. The uppermost fibers, they get accessed and inserted on the pharyngeal tubercle, while the rest of the fibers, they decussate posteriorly and they are inserted on each other and they form a pharyngeal raphe. So this is the superior constrictor, the upper border, and this is the lower border of the superior constrictor muscles. As these muscles, they take origin from the hair, they go upward. So uppermost fibers, they get inserted over the posterior to the pharyngeal tubercle. So the uppermost fibers of the right and left side of the superior constrictor muscle, they inserted on the pharyngeal tubercle, but the subsequent fibers, they come and they are decussating in the midline and they are forming the what is called the median pharyngeal raphe. So these are the fan-shaped muscles of the superior constrictor. So they go posteriorly, laterally, and then posteriorly, and they are inserted on themselves. So as the two sides they meet posteriorly, so they form a posterior median raphe throughout the extent of the all the middle and posterior constrictor also, they also inserted on itself. So it form the median pharyngeal raphe. The median pharyngeal raphe. So this raphe is exemplified with the help of the pea. As we know, the legume of the pea, when it is opened, we see the seeds, the pea are attached. Where these peas are attached? So what is this called? This is called the median raphe. So similarly, this is also the median raphe, where the right constrictor muscle fibers, they go posteriorly and they decussate in the midline. So the decussation, the crossing of these fibers is called the median pharyngeal raphe. All the three muscles are there. And then also there is a gap between all the three flower pods. Similarly, there is also a gap between the superior and the middle and the inferior constrictor muscles also as well. So this is superior constrictor muscle. Now there is a gap is left between the base of the skull, posterior border of the medial pterygoid plate, and the uppermost fibers of the superior constrictor. So this gap is closed by a membrane which is called the pharyngobasilar fascia. This is called the pharyngobasilar fascia. And this fascia is pierced by three structures. Number one is the eustachian tube, and one muscle is the levator palati muscle, and two arteries, the greater palatal branch of the facial artery and the palatal branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery. Four structures here, the pharyngobasilar fascia. So this fascia is attached superiorly to the base of the skull, anterior to the posterior border of the medial pterygoid plate. Inferiorly, this fascia merges down over the middle superior constrictor with the buccopharyngeal fascia, which is covering the outer surface of the pharynx. So this is about the superior constrictor muscle. Then come the middle constrictor muscle. So middle constrictor muscle is also fan-shaped. So its origin is from the lower part of the stylohyoid ligament. So this is the stylohyoid ligament. As we know, it is attached to the lesser cordon of the hyoid bone. So number one origin is from the lower part of the stylohyoid ligament. Then also the origin from the lesser cordon of the from the lesser cordon of the hyoid bone plus the entire length of the greater cordon. So this is the origin of middle constrictor. These middle constrictor muscles, they run in the fan-shaped way and they try to reach the pharyngeal tubercle, but they cannot reach there, so they run from their origin and they are inserted on medial pharyngeal raphe. The lower fibers, they go in the fan shape like this, and they are inserted on median pharyngeal raphe. So this is the middle constrictor. Now come the inferior constrictor. Inferior constrictor has got two parts, thyropharyngeus and cricopharyngeus part. The thyropharyngeus part takes origin from the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage plus adjoining part of the lamina of the thyroid cartilage and a tendinous ridge over the cricothyroid muscle also. So this is almost fan-shaped muscle. Lower fibers are almost horizontal. So this is thyropharyngeus part. The lower cricopharyngeus part takes origin from the cricoid cartilage outer surface, and these cricopharyngeus part of the inferior constrictor are almost horizontal and it forms a U shape, and they merges with the inner circular muscles of the esophagus. So they are U-shaped, so they are almost horizontal, the cricopharyngeus part of the inferior constrictor. So how this the three constrictor muscles they are? Then the three vertical muscles. One is the styloid muscle. So this muscle taken from the styloid process, and this muscle is merging with the superior constrictor, and it pulls the pharyngeal tube upward during the deglutition process, which is anti-gravity action of the stylopharyngeus. And the stylopharyngeus muscle is accompanied by the glossopharyngeal nerve, which enters into the gap between the superior and middle constrictor muscle. So this is the height of this muscle, the glossopharyngeal nerve. The ninth nerve is entering because it has to supply the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. So it is sensory nerve to the mucous membrane of posterior 1/3. So it is the glossopharyngeal. It accompanies the stylopharyngeus muscle. Then comes the salpingopharyngeus muscle. The salpingopharyngeus muscle takes in from the base of the eustachian tube, and this muscle from the base of this tube, so it goes downward, salpingopharyngeus, and this is continuous with the middle constrictor muscle, salpingopharyngeus. Plus it is also attached to the thyroid, posterior border of the thyroid cartilage also. That is called the salpingopharyngeus. Then third muscle is the paratopharyngeus. So this paratopharyngeus muscle, it takes origin from the hard palate and palatine aponeurosis. So as we know, the hard palate lies here, and below this lies the, posterior to this lies the palatine aponeurosis. So this paratopharyngeus muscle, after taking from the hard palate, posterior part, it goes inside the middle constrictor muscle, and it is inserted over the posterior median pharyngeal raphe, and it forms a U-shaped sling-like structure. So they are the horizontal fibers of the paratopharyngeus muscle. The mucous membrane inside the pharynx raised a ridge over them. This is called the Passavant's ridge. So Passavant ridge is raised by the underlying horizontal fibers of the paratopharyngeus muscle. Passavant's ridge. So during food intake in the oral cavity, when we are taking the food, then this palatopharyngeal muscles, horizontal fibers, they constrict, and passament's ridge is becoming the closer. At the same time, the uvula musculo-uvuli also contracts, and this musculo-uvuli becomes horizontal, and it fills the gap between the passament's ridge, and this is as close like this. So this closes this is called the nasopharyngeal isthmus. So this nasopharyngeal isthmus is closed by the passament's ridge and the uvula. No even a drop of water can go from oral cavity into the nasal cavity. As we start chewing the food in the oral cavity, this passament's ridge contracts and uvula contracts, and there is a closure of the nasopharyngeal isthmus. So that is the mechanism. The rest of the fibers of the palatopharyngeus, which takes in from the lateral surface of the hard palate, they run anteriorly and they go downward outside the constrictor muscles, and they are inserted over the posterior border of the lamina of the thyroid cartilage. So these are the palatopharyngeal muscles which are going downward and forward to be inserted on the thyroid lamina posterior border. So this is also the part of the palatopharyngeal muscle. The uppermost fibers, they also, middle fibers, they merge with the constrictor muscles of the pharynx. So this is the palatopharyngeal muscle. And as we know, the thyroid gland is also attached to the trachea, isthmus, again second and third tracheal rings, and the lateral lobe lies laterally over the pharynx also. So during deglutition, what happens? This palatopharyngeal muscle contracts. The passament's ridge is contracting. So whole of the muscle contracts and it elevates the thyroid cartilage upward. With the thyroid cartilage, cricoid and the trachea also moves slightly upward in direction, and the thyroid gland also moves up. This is the region. Any swelling related to the thyroid gland moves up during the deglutition. So any swelling around the thyroid gland we found, in order to confirm it, we take the deglutition test. So if during deglutition that swelling which is assumed to be thyroid gland moves upward, it means this is the confirmation that this is the thyroid swelling. So this is the palatopharyngeal muscle is helping to lifting the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid cartilage, as well as the thyroid gland. Because we know the thyroid glands is hanging from cricoid cartilage, that is the suspensory ligament of the berry. So when the thyroid or larynx moves upward because of the action or contraction of the palatopharyngeal muscle, so automatically the cricoid cartilage, as this moves, the thyroid gland also moves along with the ligament of berry upward. So that is the upward movement of the thyroid gland is done. So this is how we do the 6 muscles of the pharynx which are forming the tube. 3 circular muscles and 3 vertical muscles. Now, the outer surface of these pharyngeal muscles, they are covered by the buccopharyngeal fascia, and in the upper part that is the pharyngobasilar fascia. Below this come the muscles, and inside the muscles there is a lining of the mucous membrane. The mucous membrane of the nasopharynx is ciliated columnar epithelium, while the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx is the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. That is the epithelium of the friction. So in this way we construct a pharyngeal tube which has filled the gap between the neck posteriorly with prevertebral fascia and the muscles and the fascia, and anterior is the posterior part of the three cavities. So this is how the what is called the pharynx is constricted. Now this pharynx constrictor, three muscles, there is the gap. So the structure they pass through that. So between the superior constrictor and the middle constrictor, there is a gap. Here passes the glossopharyngeal membrane. Then there is also a gap between the middle constrictor and the inferior constrictor. So gap between the lower border of the inferior constrictor, middle constrictor, and upper border of the inferior constrictor. What passes through this gap? The structure piercing the thyroid membrane. That is the internal laryngeal nerve, superior laryngeal artery, and superior laryngeal vein. So these three structures, they pierce the thyroid membrane. So these are the same structures which pierces the thyroid membrane. So that is how we do it. Then there is also a gap between the inferior constrictor and the esophagus. And here passes the recurrent laryngeal nerve branches passes through this gap. So this is how we see the structure passing through the gap between the them. So this is the pharyngeal tube starting from the base of the skull up to the esophagus. So we have done the origin and insertion of the muscles. The action of muscle is that as we take the food inside, as the bolus of the food touches the any constrictor muscle, for example here the superior constrictor muscle, then this muscle which is touching by the bolus will be contracting, the next muscle is relaxing. So the food will come here. When the food reaches here, the middle constrictor will contract, the lower part will be relaxed, then food will reach here. In the thyropharyngeal part contracts, then cricopharyngeal. So this is how the constrictor muscle they contract where food is touched, and next part is relaxed. So it is how the deglutition process goes, and our food reaches the esophagus at the start of the GI. So this is the origin, insertion, the action, then come the nerve supply. So nerve supply of these muscles, the constrictor muscles, they are supplied by the pharyngeal plexus. Various nerves they contribute in their, because the stylopharyngeal muscle is supplied by the nerve accompanying it, that is the glossopharyngeal nerve. Now the pharyngeal plexus is formed on the outer surface of the middle constrictor muscle. So this is the middle constrictor outer surface. So here from the pharyngeal plexus, and this pharyngeal plexus has got the contribution from the sympathetic. There are the vasomotor fibers, the parasympathetic, there are the secretomotor fibers, and third is the motor nerve, that is the ninth nerve, motor contribution. Then the sensory fibers, they are also coming from the glossopharyngeal nerve. So this is how the plexus of these nerves they form on the outer surface of the middle constrictor muscle. Here it is formed somewhere. So the sympathetic fibers, they are contributed here from the cervical part of the sympathetic chain, that is superior cervical ganglion, middle cervical sympathetic ganglion, and inferior sympathetic ganglion. So these ganglions, they give the sympathetic, superior cervical ganglion and middle cervical ganglion, they give you the contribution of the sympathetic fibers to the pharyngeal plexus. The parasympathetic nerve supply comes from the vagus nerve. As you know, vagus nerve is lying in the carotid sheath, running parallel to the lateral part of the pharynx. So the vagus nerve will give the pharyngeal branches which contribute in the formation of the plexus, the pharyngeal plexus. So vagus nerve gives the parasympathetic route. Then the ninth nerve, the glossopharyngeal, as it is accompanied